There we go. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable on climate, on sustainability, and with a focus on business education. I'm Stuart Hart. I'm a professor in residence at the Herb Institute here at Michigan. Delighted to be with you. I'll be sort of moderating our discussion today. And we're really lucky, I think, fortunate to have deans from 3 business schools that are taking serious and decisive action in this space of innovating business education. And as you can see, we have Andrew Karolyi, Dean at the S.E. Johnson College of Business at Cornell. We have Ann Harrison, who is Dean of the Haas School at the University of California, Berkeley. And of course, our own Sharon Matusik, Dean here at the Ross School. Welcome to all 3 of you. We'll look forward to a spirited discussion. It'll be the usual drill where please do submit questions on the WOVA app, because we'll have a little bit of time at the end for your questions as well. But before we start, just a little bit of full disclosure on my part, because as I mentioned to the deans before the session, and as they know, I'm not an entirely disinterested interlocutor. So 30 years ago, I was on the faculty here at Michigan in the strategy area, and I was actually the founding faculty director of what is now the Herb Dual Master's program. So I have history and interest here, as it turns out. 20 years ago, I was at Cornell. I was at the Johnson School at Cornell and was the founding director of the Center for Sustainable Global Enterprise at Cornell. Andrew and I were colleagues. We were near each other. Our offices were near each other, so it's always great to see him again. And while I don't have a direct relationship with Haas, I do have an indirect one, as we noted, that being Kelly McElhaney, right? And Kelly being kind of an important professor at Haas in the area of sustainability, equity, inclusion. Kelly started her career here at Michigan. Back in the 90s, she was a managing director of the dual degree program. So there is that tie as well. And then one last note, before I kind of came back, here to Michigan again, with the Herb Institute, I was involved over the last 10 years in, kind of founding and then directing the new MBA program at the University of Vermont called the Sustainable Innovation MBA program. So with that said, I think it's clear that, I have some strong interest in this area, which I think is a good thing. It'll enable us to have a good discussion. So that said, let's get started, and we'll have a first question that's fairly broad, just to kind of get us warmed up. And we'll start with Dean Matusik on this one, followed by Dean Karolyi, and then Dean Harrison. And the question is really sort of a simple and broad one, namely the following: is sustainability here to stay? Or, is this a transformational wave, or is it more like an issue that needs to be managed that you don't want to bet the company on? And what are the implications of climate and sustainability for business writ large, but then also business education itself? So please, Dean Matusik.
Well, I will say emphatically, it is here to stay. And I hate to start us off with some depressing statistics, but I think these paint the picture of why this is such a critical area that we need to make sure we understand and are moving forward. 2023 was the hottest year on record. You probably know that. It was also the year with the largest number of billion-dollar disasters, according to NOAA. And there was a 30% increase in deaths due to extreme weather just in 2023. So that lays the picture of what we're dealing with. But then I would also say on the maybe a more uplifting side, look at all the people who are joining us here today. People who are very talented, want to work in companies, want to work in industries where they can make a difference, where it aligns with their values. So on the one hand, you have all that's going on around us in the environment that shows this is something that will persist and we have to address in a very urgent way. The flip side of that is if you're an organization and you want great talent, you need to think about that. You need to think about the fact that people like those folks in our audience today care about working for companies that are doing positive things broadly and specifically in the sustainability realm as well. So I think those factors together make the case that this is certainly not a passing fad.
Appreciate that. Thank you for that. Andrew, please.
Not a fad. I'm voting not a fad. I don't know if I can't see the audience, so I can't see their reactions, but I want to make sure they hear at least this viewpoint. I totally agree with Sharon. By the way, thank you, Sharon, for hosting ClimateCAP and for involving us. It's wonderful to be here. And Stu, it's awesome that you're moderating us. I'm so pleased to see you. You know,
Delighted.
I think what we need to do is acknowledge that there are some, let's call them chilly anti-sustainability, anti-ESG winds are blowing. And it is tempting when you see some of these things in the news that the pendulum may be shifting. If I were to characterize sort of what I see out there in the landscape, it is a little bit of a sense that maybe it's a shame how slow we, and I'm going to include we as corporates, asset managers, asset owners, bankers, and certainly business schools have been to raise general awareness. I mean, that's sort of on us to recognize those sobering facts that Sharon was sharing. You know, and of course, the potential impact of these climate change related risks for investments needed for mitigation and adaptation, to manage the risks, to invest in responsible, sustainable production and consumption, you know, the circular economy, as it were. And for us finance types like myself, the implications for cash flows, risk budgeting, and ultimately valuations as a result. The irony, of course, is climate change scientists have been talking about these trends for decades, many, many decades. These facts are coming to the forefront now, but they've been talking about this for years. And finally, frankly, the climate economists have been talking about this for at least 4 decades. Bill Norton going back to the late 70s, early 80s. And I have to say, all of this notwithstanding, some impressive thought leaders like yourself, Stu, in the corporate sustainability world, you were ringing the bell 3 decades ago, 2 decades ago. Just feels like it's all coming together a little bit late. There's sort of lateness in coming to the party in terms of the general public. And, you know, that's history. We're all in it for now. No, definitely not a fad.
Yep. Yeah, we'll get to that. Andrew, it's go time, right? It's go time. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Please, Ann.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be virtually at the University of Michigan, a great fellow public university. So wonderful. Thanks, Sharon. Nice to see you, Andrew. Andrew and I are on the board of UN Prime together. So your question about sustainability as niche, well, I mean, if you mean by sustainability that business has to accelerate the transition to net zero, if it has to reckon with the impact of climate change and shift away from fossil fuels, then absolutely that is not a fad. It is not niche. And that is clearly, in my opinion, going to be part of the business curriculum right now and way into the future. Sharon stole my very sad fact, which is that 2023 was indeed the hottest year since humanity has recorded temperatures on this globe. And we're seeing that the consequences everywhere. California, a great state for innovation, like the state of Michigan, and of course, Cornell is amazing. California was a mild weather state in the past, and now we're just seeing incredible impacts of extreme weather events all over the state, and we're seeing that all over the world too. And so basic business decisions will need to take into account and adjust to and respond to and invest in mitigation and adaptation. So it's definitely not a fad. And I really think it's core to business, and I think it's core to the planet. It's a little bit like, I remember when I started teaching global strategy, students would ask, oh, do we really need to go through all this? And it's absolutely core. Every major company, including iconic American companies like McDonald's, are now primarily global. And sustainability is exactly like globalization. It is not a nice to have. It is a must have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to me, it's especially interesting because given your professional background, you know, kind of your research, being directly as a development economist, being directly in the area, you know, sort of how do we think innovatively about policy when it comes to sustainability when it comes to inclusion around the world and emerging economies, some time at the World Bank. In other words, you have a track record of thinking deeply about this. And I'm just wondering, how is that, how you bring that to your job? How does that affect your thinking, in terms of your priorities when it comes to decisions at the Haas School?
Well, thanks for that question. I mean, I think what's great about this panel is all three of us have, I think, deep knowledge and background, but my area has been traditionally in the area of emerging markets. And I really see a need for sustainable and inclusive policies all over the world, in part because of what my background is. And as you all know, I've made sustainability my top priority as the Dean of the Haas School. And I want to introduce the concept here of climate justice. So that's really key to this conversation. The worst impacts of climate change are affecting the poorest, both in the United States. So in parts of cities, for example, where there are no trees, and the poorest in the rest of the world. And the effects are really, really tough because often these communities, they're either located in less temperate zones, or they just don't have the investments in place to counter the worst effects of extreme weather. And it's particularly tough because emerging markets are going to have to take a much less gradual paths than the rich countries took to get to net zero, to build clean energy, to use climate tech, to build out public transportation. They're going to have to move faster. And that requires a ton of money. And a ton of money is exactly what they don't have. So they have to make a costly transition quickly with very limited resources. And I've just always thought that that's not fair. The good news is there are a lot of people with great ideas, both in the US and around the world. And I actually believe that the key to the transition is business. Now, if governments were capable of putting a price on carbon, they know it's important, but they haven't done it yet, then that would be the single most important thing that governments can do. But economies aren't doing it yet. Countries aren't going alone. So our students will lead the way in the private sector. I really believe that. And all these amazing students who are there today, I wish I could be in the room with you. That is what you are doing. And of course, at Haas, we're teaching about this. And I'm just really grateful that my research, my background with international organizations, very much taught me to think globally from the beginning. I was born outside the United States. Every single one of us is a citizen of the world, and the solutions really have to come from everywhere.
Indeed. Yeah. As you know, I've felt for a long time what you've just described is the single biggest business opportunity in history. If we can wrap our minds around it, right? If we can use imagination to think about new strategies and business models to serve and lift the underserved, which is really what you're talking about. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So Andrew, a question for you. This idea of curricular innovation and kind of integration of sustainability into the core, this is something I can say, and we've talked about it from firsthand experience. It's been a 30-year quest, right? It goes back as far as I can remember. So, and we're still struggling with it. It was kind of our comment earlier. It's go time now. But at Cornell, you've put a lot of effort, right, into actually integrating this material, climate, sustainability into the core. I was wondering if you could just share with the audience kind of some of your experience, kind of what would be your advice to other schools? Just please have at it.
Yeah, thank you, Stu. And obviously it's wonderful to talk about the great things that are at Cornell, but for somebody like me, but the truth is that most business schools are now racing to innovate their curricula in response to what I think honestly all of us feel as a sense of urgency that comes from our students. Those 300 or 400, 500 people that are in that audience in Ann Arbor, it's that swell that's coming from the students that are really what is making us feel the urgency to move forward, to create the sustainability readiness in our future leaders. And by the way, the corporates out there that are hiring these students are certainly putting their pressure on us. to feel the sense of urgency to upskill. So at Cornell, we talk about our mission statement. Our mission statement is to develop the future business leaders who think about a sustainable shared prosperity. And I live that mission in every single day, thinking about that every day I wake up. We're working hard to meet the mark and speed up efforts. Now, you did hint at this in your opening comments, Stu, and you know this history well, but others don't. One nice advantage we had is having the brilliant foresight of our namesake benefactor, Sam Johnson, of the S.C. Johnson family of companies, who gave a generous gift of $10 million to us in 2004, sadly, just before he passed away. And it was to create one of the very first centers in a business school focused on sustainability, the Center for Sustainable Global Enterprise, with its inaugural namesake chair, the Sam Johnson shareholder, Stu Hart. And so, you know, it was a really important transformational gift for us. This is beyond the gift to name our actual Johnson School and ultimately the college itself. We immediately put this gift into effect, not just to hire a famous professor like Stu Hart, but actually to operationalize it in the curriculum, specifically in the core. Now, the Johnson School pioneered this new concept in core curricula and MBAs, where we compress the core into half of the first year of a 2-year residential, and the second half is what we call immersions, career track immersions. And they very much are focused on sort of action-based learning. This is like 25 years ago. And very much team-oriented, project-oriented work with outside organizations. We immediately put the gift into effect by creating a special immersion focused on sustainability, the Sustainable Global Enterprise immersion. And that is really how we hit the ground running with that gift. It's been 2 decades. There's hundreds and hundreds of MBAs that have gone through that immersion. A number of them are now chief sustainability officers at these companies that are desperately trying to upskill, and or they've launched their own sustainability related startups now and more recently. What we're doing right now, and I know that most schools are doing this as well, is they're trying to figure out mechanisms to integrate this in all of their degree programs. Michigan and Berkeley are all, like us, comprehensive business schools, soup to nuts, from undergraduate to professional masters to MBA to executive MBA. And the key now is to take those good learnings and innovate and amortize across all of our degree programs. That's what we're really pushing hard. We do have the benefit of 90 faculty members out of our 250 who self-identify as doing work in sustainability. That helps for the big lift. You know, honestly, it's often tempting to talk about this competition that's going on among business schools. We talk a lot about competition, Anne and Sharon, we're fighting for those students and so on. But the honest truth is that this competition, particularly focused on this dimension, is actually making all of us collectively better off. It's making business schools more relevant. Yes, there's a lot more work to do, and we're all up for the task, but it is helping. It is helping. And the students are really the key to success. They're pushing us, and I love it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, maybe core integration is finally happening, right? It's been a long time coming, but it's great to see the curve starting to tick up. That's wonderful. Thank you for that. So Sharon, at Ross, of course, we have this richness of centers and institutes that have various perspectives and angles, kind of points of view on these challenges, right, around sustainability and climate, inequality, and so forth, you know, from the perspective of environment, from international development, from positive organization and management and technology and innovation. There's all of these resources in the building in terms of intellectual horsepower. Could you say a little bit about how, you know, you've been able to harness that, right? And how do you use that in terms of, you know, sort of integrating this more effectively and making it a priority at the school?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a really great point. I think we all have such complementary views on this, you know, so the curriculum is a super important piece. And then what we see at the Ross School is we have these centers and institutes. Many of them serve as a real bridge to the community, the business community, different industry sectors. And that provides a richness to the student experience that I think makes those learnings much stickier for our students. We talked a little bit about action-based learning. That's a hallmark of a Ross education going back 30 plus years. Our centers are really great fuel for those kinds of projects. And to your point, Stu, it's really across the board. There's so many different ones that play an important role. And I would say one of the things that is fantastic about Michigan, many of you know this, there's something like 110 departments in the top 10. And so those centers give us a chance to connect with each other and connect with the business world in a way that provides opportunities for students to really learn through doing. Just some examples, obviously we've been talking a lot about the Herb Institute, but that's a joint institute between both the business school and our School of the Environment and Sustainability. That's just such a powerful mechanism. We've got lots of students sitting in the audience today who are dual degree students, but for us to be able to amplify what we do in the business school by also allowing our students to learn with the students in our C's program is incredibly powerful. And those students do really amazing things. Their internships, their action-based learning projects are for companies ranging from the Environmental Defense Fund to Starbucks, Nike, REI, where they're really putting that classroom experience to work when they're doing projects for these different organizations that they're engaged with. So that's on the sustainability side very clearly. But also you mentioned some of our other centers. So we've got ZLI, the Zell Lurie Institute in Entrepreneurship, does a fantastic job of bringing students together around solving problems in new and different ways through creating ventures. I had to step out from our meeting because they had their big Michigan Business Challenge. I got to give out $100,000 in prize money in between sessions. But those are another really important mechanism in terms of engaging people around new ways to solve problems that maybe existing companies have a much harder time doing because their routines and processes are embedded. And so having an entrepreneurial venture that can come in and do things in a fundamentally different way can really help solve some of those challenges. And a lot of those ventures have some sort of sustainability focus to them. And many of you on joining us today probably know the volume of venture money going into climate tech companies is astronomical. So last year was a down year for a lot of VC, but in general, the venture money going into climate tech is off the charts. I would also mention our William Davidson Institute. So we've got an organization that's affiliated with the University of Michigan that focuses on low and middle income countries. And I was just reflecting on some of Anne's comments. So this organization is doing research and student-driven projects in country in a lot of these places. And they've done things like Clean Cooking Alliance projects in Africa. They worked with the state of Chihuahua on their e-mobility efforts. It's an amazing experience, both for the students as a learning experience, but also for these organizations around the globe that they're working with. So it gives our students a chance to not only take those lessons from the classroom and apply them in a way that helps them develop those skills more deeply, but also they're making an impact. They're working with these organizations around the globe and doing things that are helping to move those specific organizations forward. And I reflect on some of the information that Anne shared. You look at some of these challenges and they seem so big, and we think about, well, what can we actually do on a more micro level? And some of these action-based learning projects that I know we all think are very important, that's a way to get started, right? You're learning by doing, and you're creating value for these organizations that might not be able to move some of these initiatives forward in quite the same way without the talent that we have joining us today in terms of our students.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So next question for the three of you is sort of at a level up from just the school level, sort of more of the systemic level. So by my way of thinking, we often with companies these days, the idea of system change has really come to the fore in a significant way, that companies to a certain degree, especially publicly held companies, are constrained to some degree by the current Wall Street logic, of short-termism and quarterly returns. And that makes it more difficult to invest transformationally, right, in the kinds of investments we all need to happen, right, in the coming years. And it seems that there's an analogy to that at the business school level, right? That at some level, it's not Wall Street, right? But it is the rankings, right? It's the rankings, you know, it's Business Week, it's US News and World Report that have their own particular criteria, right? That you, in some sense, have to manage to. And so my question is, to what extent do those rankings and what they stress influence things like admissions, the curriculum, and especially, you know, kind of career development and placement? And what do we do about it? Is it going to take really wholesale system change when it comes to rankings in order for business schools to really make the transformational changes needed? Let's start with Andrew, and then Sharon, and then Ann. Please, Andrew.
Okay, thanks. Good setup. For business schools, to be honest, I have great admiration and respect for the rankings, and I value the market feedback. I know all of us believe in it. But I actually don't think about this particular choice as being one that is sort of a reaction or to the pressures from the rankings. If you have it in your core mission statement as a founding mission statement, you kind of don't think about wavering from it as a matter of commitment. And I often actually think about the opportunities presented by the rankings as one for differentiation and to do better, always to do better. So yeah, I don't think about the criteria matter that much. It's great to see them progressing along the way, but I don't think it induces pressures. If anything, going back to my earlier comment, I think more pressures come from the students and the employer and the students more than the rankings themselves. But I get the nature of the question. With respect to the companies, I think that was part of your question as well, right? We're talking about
at least that there's an analogy there.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate it. This is getting closer to my own area of research. I think the pressure of the public markets actually do matter, and there's a lot of evidence to that effect. I was the Review of Financial Studies. We published a study by Sophie Shive, Michigan Ross PhD, Sharon, R.G. Forster. They're both now at Notre Dame. And they actually showed that private firms are much less likely to pollute and much less likely to be succumb to EPA penalties and sanctions and publicly listed firms, which they ascribe to the much greater intense scrutiny that comes from being a publicly listed firm with the associated reporting obligations. When it comes to actually public firms, those that actually had more intense monitoring and scrutiny from institutional investors actually showed themselves to have much less in the way of EPA penalties and so on. So there's a lot of evidence in this. And going back, I guess, last remark, to the cool anti-ESG, anti-sustainability winds that are blowing out there, I do wonder and spend a lot of time wondering just what kind of consequences there may be in terms of, like, for example, the stall in the SEC's mandate to have report outs on Scope 1, Scope 2 greenhouse gas emission disclosures for the public listed companies. Europe is so far ahead with their European Sustainability Reporting Standards, the International Sustainability Standards Board. I mean, there's a lot more movement there, and that seems to be mattering a lot more in the public space. So pressures on the corporations matter and can make a difference. Business schools, we're moving in the right direction without the worry about the ranking. So much.
Okay. Sharon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say some of the things that I think are really very positive signs are things like the accreditation agency that accredits all of our business schools every 5 years is called AACSB. And they changed their standards back in 2020 to include a standard around social impact. And I think that's a very powerful move, because even if all you care about is the outgoing salaries and rankings, you can't be accredited if you don't have the social impact statement as part of what you're doing at your business school. So I think that move was a big move in terms of institutionalizing a focus on that social impact. And of course, schools can vary in terms of what they focus on with regard to social impact, but sending that message that the business school environment is such that you have to have part of your operations focused on creating value beyond just economic value through what you're training your students on. So I think that's really powerful. And then I also think you see, some contagion effects from that. So for example, the Financial Times has been very active in trying to think about how do you measure impact as a way to think about incorporating that in its rankings. So all these things are moving the needle in terms of institutionalizing this focus in a way that makes it, you have to really work to opt out, if your accreditation is demanding it, if some of the rankings are continuing to move in a direction of trying to figure out how to measure impact. And I don't have the answer. I think all of us sitting around this virtual table, would have a hard time figuring out exactly what is the best way to measure impact across a broad cross section of schools. But the fact that that is a big conversation, I think, is really powerful. And then, on the rankings part, you're also seeing that component that looks at starting salaries becoming smaller over time as well. So, you as a business school don't have to worry about everyone going to consulting and investment banking because, that part of the rankings is becoming smaller as well.
That matters for sure. Yeah. Anne, please.
Thanks. Yeah, the rankings. I mean, a very popular topic. I actually had a number of conversations with the editor of the Financial Times, who's responsible for business school rankings. And I was trying to persuade him, and I think we've been successful, to use the rankings as a force for good. And to, in fact, increase the role that, say, those of us who really prioritize sustainability, increase the reward to schools for doing that. And actually, I was hoping they would do it more broadly. Reward schools that are a huge engine of social mobility, that take kids from the bottom of the income distribution to the top. And I'm really happy to see that the FT is doing that. Unfortunately, U.S. News is going in the opposite direction. They're actually making how much you earn when you get out and how quickly you do that more important. And that is unfortunate because sustainability can sometimes take, those roles can take longer. Having said all that, to be honest, I think that we are prioritizing fighting climate change and a broader concepts of sustainability because it's the right thing to do. And whether or not it becomes part of the rankings is kind of almost besides the point. Having said that, I would love to see the rankings have a kind of a more broad concept of what it means to be a sustainable business school. It's important not to just mention your school's carbon footprint, but also to measure how much are you infusing your core with sustainable concepts. How much are you providing what Sharon talked about, and which we really emphasize, co-curricular offerings in the area. For example, we have the Center for Responsible Business. We have a new prize for research, which is the most innovative in the area of sustainability. We have now also, like my colleagues, we have very exciting dual degree across the campus, partnering with the College of Natural Resources. You can get in 2.5 years a master's in climate solutions and an MBA. So really partnering the best of Berkeley. These, it would be great to see if the rankings agencies value these cross-campus collaborations, value how much you reduce your carbon footprint, value your co-curricular offerings. Another thing we do that should be prioritized is teaching students how to invest in both public and private markets, right? We've heard that there's massive infusion of investments into both of those. So we have portfolio courses where you learn how to construct either a public portfolio or, much more difficult, what does a portfolio in private companies looks like. So we're really, really excited about that. Having said all that, I just want to say that I'm hoping that this change in business school curriculum will be broader, that it will affect many different areas. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on is thinking about sustainability in a sense that it hits everything. It hits finance, it hits energy, it hits real estate, it hits agriculture, it hits CSR. So, I mean, just to summarize, I would love to see the investments that schools like ours and my colleagues are making. Those investments, I would like to see those investments reflected more in the rankings, because I do believe students out there, you will vote with your feet.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So last question, I'm glancing over at the clock. You know, this will be a little bit of a lightning round, but I think we want to direct this one at the students down in Robertson Auditorium in particular. So, and Andrew, we'll start with you and then go to Ann and finally Sharon. And the question has to do with, you know, this issue of how students can be helpful, right? That, you know, it often is overblown, you know, the power that executive leadership has to make change on their own, right? And that's even more of an issue when it comes to academic institutions. You know, it's kind of tough to herd those faculty cats. So the question is, how do students become more effective allies for you, right? And change makers, you know, to work with you, not just in terms of curricular innovation, but also, you know, there are other elements upstream, like orientation, you know, and admissions, and then downstream in terms of what we were just talking about, career development, placement, introducing other options. What's your advice to students so that they can be the best allies and the most effective change makers working with you in collaboration? Andrew.
I think Ann and Sharon and I are all going to sing from the same song sheet here, which is that they are actually the strongest allies and the strongest ambassadors for advancing this, because they understand the importance of this for their own career advancement in the long haul. And when I say the strongest allies for us as business school leaders who want to advance things, corporate sponsors are also really strong allies, but the students can be the most important. Faculty oversee curricula in each of our 3 institutions. Hard to change curricula. We're doing our best. There's inertia. There's resistance. You hinted at it, Stu. But the truth of the matter is the co-curricular stuff that Ann was just talking about is really where the excitement can happen. And it can be the vanguard of advancements in curricula. So a lot of the student club initiatives that come up in the sustainability space are really, really important. Those partnerships that Sharon and Ann were both talking about are critical here at Cornell. We have this wonderful new program that we just launched with our Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability, the equivalent of the Herb Institute at Michigan, where we actually are going to mash up teams of MBA students with PhD students and postdocs in the natural sciences to basically develop action plans over the course of a year for product innovation and startups. This is where it can all happen. It's curricular, co-curricular. It's a sort of a general all-purpose push. And it's also, since you mentioned it, double down on this, the students as ambassadors to the next generations of students, reminding them that this is the reason to come to Cornell. This is the reason to come to Haas. This is the reason to come to Ross. Is if you really want to make a difference here, come for this reason, because these schools are making a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Ann, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I think personally, I think one of the most incredible things about Berkeley are the students. And I know that the students at the other campuses are incredible too. I mean, this was where the free speech movement started. Our students are such change makers, and a lot of changes come from the bottom up. So students out there, you really do make a difference. Let me give you a couple of examples. We have a lot of student-run organizations who bring in sustainability experts in all sorts of areas: venture capital, private equity, startups, you name it. We actually have students who are running our Dean Speaker Series and who spearheaded the focus on sustainability this year. So just over the last 2 weeks, just to give very concrete examples, the students interviewed the CEO of Levi's, which has been a real big social impact company last week. This week, the students interviewed the founder of Tom's Shoes, who created the 1-for-1 model. You buy 1 pair of shoes as a consumer, a free pair is provided by the company to somebody in the world who doesn't have a pair of shoes. So we're seeing students over and over again just make such a huge difference. So students out there, we listen to you. You really are making a difference, whether as alumni, through affinity groups, whatever it is you do, it is really, really powerful. And I just am so fortunate to be able to work with such dynamic students at UC Berkeley.
So I would echo that.
Excellent.
You know, if you think about one of the biggest things our students can do is to get your friends to also care about this, right? Because what do we pay attention to? What are the enrollments in the electives? How many students show up at an event? You know, for all of those action-based learning projects that we put out there, how excited are people about the sustainability ones? You know, so it's obviously your energy that makes a difference, but you're in a very powerful position in terms of getting your peers and your colleagues also excited about some of these issues, so that that amplifies all of the offerings that we're putting on the table. So, you know, keep that interest coming, get your colleagues excited about things, and stay active. You know, I think it's, you know, be involved in coordinating the speaker series, be involved in asking for cases, you know, in a certain area. Write the cases. You know, we've got one of our faculty, Andy Hoffman, does a lot of case writing with his students. And that's been tremendously powerful, not only in creating cases that we teach here, but we distribute them through WDI. Maybe some of you in the audience have had some of those cases in some of your classes, but that engagement allows you to expand your effort beyond just your own learning to a much broader audience. So students are the power.
Students got the power. Hey, Andrew and Sharon, thank you. I think Nick, are you out there? I think we may have time for one or two questions. You know, Nick's voice should loom in here momentarily.
Yeah, I'm right here, Stu.
There we go.
So yeah, thank you all, Dean, so much. We're getting a ton of engagement from students, a lot asking about, you know, movement on the core. How do we integrate sustainability, you know, beyond just electives that folks can opt into? So we really appreciate you addressing that. I know if we had a lot more time, we'd probably dig deeper into that tactically. But one I think that hasn't come up enough that we've gotten a chance to talk about is, you know, business schools provide a lot of career development resources and recruiting support for students that are interested in the more quote unquote typical MBA roles in consulting and IB. How do we bridge that gap to support students who maybe want to go into more of these sustainability and climate related both internships and full-time roles, but just don't have the support and are afraid to make that jump from a purely economic resource perspective?
Well, anyone want to take?
I would just, you know, like I'll just make a few brief comments and then turn it over to my colleagues. You know, I feel incredibly fortunate that at Michigan we have the URB Institute, and we have an amazing set of students who are URB fellows that are getting joint degrees both from the business school and from the School of the Environment and Sustainability. And because we have that infrastructure, we are regularly lining up internships and projects that are at that intersection. So I think it starts early. You know, don't wait until you're looking for the job at the end, but get involved with projects, make connections through those projects, get involved with internships that are in that area that you're most interested in, and, you know, go to events like this. You know, we've got alumni who are joining us today that are speaking and are on the panels. So I think being proactive in terms of working on those things more quickly makes a big difference. And I will say this area is different from investment banking and consulting in that it doesn't have the very structured path. You know, we find this in tech too. You know, if you want investment banking or consulting, there's a very clear track and you know what you have to do when, and there's deadlines and things like that. These other areas require, you know, they're much more of a build your own adventure. And so you have to be more active in terms of networking and getting involved in projects and internships that are going to set you up for the right kind of opportunities.
Yep. And Andrew, I saw you had your.
Well, I'm happy to. And forgive me, Nick, for this answer, but I do find there's a little bit of a false dichotomy in the question. It's sort of like a career path, either or. That might have been the case maybe 5 years ago, but what I'm hearing, and I spent a lot of time with the Aspen Institute's Business and Society program. They put on these ESG summits. What I'm hearing is the upskilling need for sustainability expertise is actually all across the board, all across the board. I don't see how you can become, finance guy talking, how you can become an iBanker with a 10, 20-year career right now without fully understanding how climate change related risks might be impacting the cash flows and the underlying valuations of companies that you'd be doing deals for. It's just pervasive. So I would say that while it might feel sometimes this is the way, I'm guessing that the traditional tracks are actually going to be very much open to people that want to really double down in pushing their skill sets in this space. That's
Great point. I think those are really, really important points.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I just want to follow up on that. We keep saying we are not we're not here just to create chief sustainability officers. Every single student is going to be encountering these challenges, whether it's in consulting or investment banking, you name it. And so we think it's very important to provide that. In response to your question, Stu, about how do you infuse this in the core? Well, we always go for the carrot approach, which is we have incentivized our core teaching faculty to infuse sustainability into the core courses. So that's one way to do it, and we're renewing that efforts. We've also, in terms of career outcomes, we've actually expanded our career management group to include advisors whose focus this actually is. So we're creating specialists in their area, which is going to be particularly important for the concurrent degree in climate solutions and the MBA. And we just launched actually a sustainability alumni group. So that really focuses on networking and things like that. And the Bay Area is a really wonderful place to be, given the obsession with green energy and generative AI.
Wonderful. So with that, I guess we probably should draw to a close. They're giving you a hand right now in Robertson, even though we can't hear it. Nick's clapping, I'm clapping. Thanks so much to the three of you. Really appreciate your time. Good discussion today.
well done by you, Stu, and Ann and Sharon. Thank you very much for co-paneling with me here. That was great.
It was a great conversation. Thanks all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye now. Thank you.